Man, I've been looking forward to 806 for the entire morning because of an interview that I'm about to do with a guy by the name of Scott Mann. And Scott, you are producer and star of a play called The Last Out. And I did a deep dive into your background, Scott. You are a retired Green Beret, Afghanistan war veteran as well. And you've put together a play, and it is, again, called The Last Out. And we've all heard the stories of the first in. Your play is the story of those that were last out of Afghanistan. And you've got quite the decorated history. But tell me about Last Out and tell me how this whole thing came together, because it is a fascinating story.
Oh, thank you, Dan. And thanks for having me on, too. It means a lot. And, the first thing that I think I will say is we are in the month August. It's the 2-year anniversary of the collapse of Kabul and of course, the horrific suicide bombing at Abbey Gate. And, the first thing I will say is that, our hearts go out to the families and the fallen at Abbey Gate. And as we go through this very, very tough time, I think it really is the kind of context we need to consider for the play. I was indeed an Afghanistan war veteran in special operations, and I actually wrote the play, Dan, 6 years ago because I felt like so many Americans did not know or understand what the impact of modern war really is on our warfighters and our families when they go back to war over and over again. There are people in your listening area who have deployed to combat in Iraq and Afghanistan 5, 6, even 10 times. And I wanted to tell that story from the stage, really for civilians, so that they could feel it and also to validate the service of those who lived it.
Now, this is called an elegy for the dead. It's an elegy. They say it's a lament for the dead. This is the story of people that, you fought with who didn't come home. Is that part of what this play is all about?
Yeah, that's really accurate, Dan. I mean, an elegy is a lament for the dead, and this is really a story of a Gold Star family. This is a story of a family of a Green Beret sergeant who's based on 3 team sergeants that I had in my unit that didn't make it home, and it tells his story as he's mortally wounded in the beginning and his desire to ascend to the warrior resting place of Valhalla, but he's stuck between his fire base and his living room, and he can't let go. So his buddies, who have also been killed in combat, come down as operators from Valhalla, and they take Danny back through his life, and they reintroduce him to the people that made his heart pump the most blood so that he can figure out where he's holding on and he can let go. He meets his wife again. He has his son again. He goes through special forces training, 9/11, and then deployment after deployment. And in doing this, the audience, both civilian and military, Vietnam, all the way up through post 9/11, goes for this collective ride together so that Danny can let go.
A lot of the folks in this play are veterans.
They are. In fact, the majority of the folks in the play are veterans. Only 2 are professional actors. The other 2 are military family members, one of them being my son. And, we started this play back in 2019, Dan. I wanted to just get it on the road and perform it wherever we could. We performed it in school cafeterias. We performed it in business centers. We put 28,000 miles on a U-Haul van with our little nonprofit, The Hero's Journey, just traveling around the country from Santa Barbara to New York City. And then when COVID hit, it shut us down, so we turned it into a low-budget film on Amazon Prime, and Gary Sinise saw it. I was very involved. I stood up the group Task Force Pineapple with other volunteer groups when Afghanistan collapsed, and Gary, I think, saw me on the news, and he watched the film, and he contacted me, and he said, we did a similar play called Tracers after the Vietnam War to help ease accelerate the healing of moral injury. I think we should on the road, and that's what we did. We've been on the road as part of the Gary Sinise Foundation ever since.
By the way, I should mention Scott Mann, producer and star of this play, The Last Out. It will be playing at the Franklin Theater Friday, August 25th. 2 performances on Saturday, August 26th as well, again, at the Franklin Theater. And one of the things that as I was doing a deep dive into your past experiences. I mean, you are the guy, and I've spoken about this many times. Mission Pineapple Express. You were the one who coordinated Operation Pineapple Express. You organized with other veterans. You rescued over 1,000 of our allies in Afghanistan as Afghanistan fell and in the weeks and months following. I mean, talk about that experience and how those families are doing now.
Well, it was a very gutting experience, and I have to say that, first of all, the men and women who were part of Pineapple, the volunteers, really did the heavy lifting on that. It was such a gutting experience for all of them because, remember, most of these were seasoned combat veterans who were really working to put the war behind them. There were also some active duty members, and all of this, trauma and emotional impact was brought back up with the collapse of Afghanistan and then getting these desperate phone calls from partners because the government didn't answer the phone. The folks that had worked with them did. And so imagine being on the world's longest 911 call as, someone who helped you stay alive in combat is now being hunted and chased all over the country. So it was a very terrible experience, really. I mean, there were a lot of volunteer groups besides Pineapple who rescued, frankly, more than we did. But it was really a gutting thing to go through. However, I think it did show the length that our veterans and our military families will go to honor a promise, even if no one else does. And that meant more than anything. And the families, it's a mixed bag, Dan. Some of them are doing okay. Some made it out, and they're doing pretty well, like Nizam. He has resettled pretty well. If you read the book Operation Pineapple Express, he's kind of the main character. But some of the others are really struggling. They're really struggling to find jobs, and many of them didn't make it. They're stuck in Afghanistan still. They're being hunted, and unfortunately, many of the commandos and Afghan special forces and interpreters that we worked with have been killed or they've just disappeared. And so I tell people, with this play, if you want to know why Operation Pineapple Express was necessary in the first place, you need to come see this play because it takes you for the ride and explains in 2 hours why things fell apart so terribly at the end.
And I want to make sure because, this is a conservative talk show and radio station, but there's a lot of, Democrats that listen too. And so it bears folks knowing that there's nothing political about this play.
No,
this is about the experiences of the Green Berets and how you really do work closely with the local tribes and the indigenous folks that are in these areas, particularly Afghanistan. And so really getting to know the locals. And so, Operation Pineapple, the Mission Pineapple Express, that was part of working closely with those tribes and trying to rescue the people that helped you stay alive. Is that part of the play, The Last Out?
It really is, Dan, and I appreciate you calling that out because I've always been adamant about the fact, one, as a soldier, I was required to, support the Constitution, not one party or the other. And I've spent a lot of time in the public space talking about terrorism, talking about ISIS, talking about Afghanistan. And I've always tried to play it right down the middle apolitically because it's not a Republican issue. It is not a Democrat issue. It is an American issue. And how we treat our partners now will determine our standing in the world in the future for our children, number one. It affects our national security. And then the other thing, too, Dan, is when people come to see the show, I think they're really surprised at just the mixture and diversity in the room, not just in ethnicity, religion, and things like that, but also in terms of, ideology and thought. We have a talk back after every show. And my experience has been that storytelling is really what opens us up, and it allows us to get a new perspective, a shared perspective, and we need a shared perspective around this hard topic of war. If we're going to keep sending our young men and women into harm's way, less than 1% of the population, we damn sure need to feel some degree of what it is that we're asking them to do, and that's what this play delivers. And it addresses even the division in the country. As my character, Danny, wrestles with his son joining the Army, he looks around and he sees the division that's happening in this country along all kinds of different lines. And this is a very difficult thing for veterans. I think it's a big reason that we're seeing so much veteran suicide and mental health issues is that the division that's happening in the country all around us after they went and fought so hard to protect us.
Now, we mentioned earlier that the cast here, most are veterans, and you do play the lead character, Scott Mann, joining us, by the way. And had you ever acted before when you were getting ready to, you've written the play and, you're getting ready to do it. And had you ever done any acting before? Or was this a totally new experience?
So, Dan, prior to my midlife crisis, I did perform a play when I was a junior in high school. But other than that, no. I retired from the military. I was a speaker, spoke from the stage. I had done TED Talks, and so I had taken some acting classes as a way to become a better speaker. And I was dealing with a lot of issues as my son told me he was going to join the Army, and I just saw a lot going on. I didn't like the way that we had abandoned the Afghan villagers who we had worked with in 2010 with a program called Village Stability that I helped stand up. And by 2013, we had abandoned them. Many of them were killed. And to me, it was a foreshadowing of what was going to happen in Afghanistan. I retired from the Army as a lieutenant colonel, and I just didn't like where things were going. And so for me, it was an attempt to just kind of come to terms with what was happening in our military, with the careerism, with all of the social issues surrounding modern war. It's not an anti-war. It's not a pro-war. It's just a story of one sergeant's attempt to let go of all the pain that he's holding on to and make meaning out of this long war. And so I did it really for me. And then someone talked me into doing a scene at a community theater event, and I did, and it really resonated. And so my wife, Monty, and I decided, you know what, let's go for it. Let's use our nonprofit, The Hero's Journey, which helps with storytelling for veterans, to try to put it out there and see if it lands. And it turns out it really landed.
Well, and then the thing is, you talk about it's not pro-war or anti-war. I think, as you mentioned earlier, it's about understanding. And there's a lot of people out there who don't have a thorough understanding of what our veterans go through, especially in a situation like Afghanistan. And so I am very excited to see this play again. Scott Mann is joining us, producer and star of The Last Out. And I'm, again, looking forward to being at the Franklin Theater. We've got one evening, Friday, August 25th, one performance on Friday, August 25th, two performances on Saturday, August 26th. And, Scott, people can get tickets at the Franklin Theater's website. It is franklintheater.com. Does your play, by and large, does it have a website itself that people can get more information on the play itself?
Absolutely. I invite people to go to lastoutplay.com, and you're going to see so much cool information on the play. There's a documentary there, a behind-the-scenes documentary called A Voice Never Heard. It's an award-winning documentary of us on the road in 2019 in our U-Haul van. I really encourage people to watch that before they come to the play because it gives such a backstory. Also, I encourage veterans to bring civilian neighbors with you. Civilians, bring your veteran neighbors with you. This is a chance for us to sit as a community from the Nashville area and really go for the storytelling ride of a hard topic, and then have a talk back at the end and come together around something that we need to talk about. So, go to lastoutplay.com or scottmann.com, and you can find a ton of info there. Mann.
And again, it's franklintheater.com. You can buy tickets there. Friday, August 25th, one performance, two performances on Saturday, August 25th. And I'm going to be at one of these performances, and I cannot wait, and very much appreciate you joining us on Nashville's Morning News and Super Talk 99.7 WTN.